Hey, Elsie Jensen here. I am just finishing up our dinner today. We made a beef stew, and I'm about to roll out my dough for soft pretzels. If you love like Annie's pretzels or Pretzel Time, whatever the ones that you get at the mall, the soft ones, this recipe is essentially just like it. I'm going to put a big sheet of parchment paper on my thing. Parchment paper, it works way better than like Spam or Pam on whatever grease on there. It just keeps everything from sticking. So I have my sheet lined, and then while that's waiting, I'm going to put baking soda in a pot of water that's boiling. So like classic hard pretzels or one of that, or German pretzels are cooked with lime or lye and water. That can be kind of painful on your hands if you're not careful. So I use baking soda and I just kind of shake it in there, and then the water, and that will give it the nice smooth outside of it. Okay, so I've got my dough, which I made a couple hours ago. I'm gonna put it out. I had it proofing. It is pretty much made from yeast, butter, flour, brown sugar, and salt. So each one of these, this is a pastry cutter if you don't know what it is. It's great for cutting dough. It just slices right through it. And then I'll cut through this on my counter, and now I'm gonna start making them into sections. I'm cutting these into 6. That way I can make several pretzels. I'll have lots of smaller pretzels to have. Sometimes I do them bigger, so I might make these ones some bigger so I can have some different sizes. Yeah, we're making some pretzels. I think we'll just that. Okay, and then what you take it, you take your dough, and we're gonna roll it out like this, and you just keep rolling it just like you're making a snake out of Play-Doh, and you're gonna roll, and then you twist. Yeah, I kind of do a cheat. I don't do the whole fancy twist thing. I just do a roll and a knot because it's just faster than trying to do a twist. So I'm gonna roll out my next one. It goes pretty fast, and by the time I'm done rolling all of these out, my water should be ready to drop them in. And you do that, so I kind of flick, and then I pass through, and I bowl. So it's more like a pretzel roll. You can actually make them in the traditional pretzel style, but these just work faster instead of taking the time. And when you have 5 kids, I'm always about faster and efficiency, because who has time to have a 5-course Gordon Ramsay meal? So I'm gonna get my next set of dough. I think I'll take a small piece with this, and I'm gonna roll it out. Yeah, roll it out like a snake. Yeah, you're gonna roll one. You can roll this one right here if you want to. Yeah. You can practice with that one, buddy. And then I twist and tuck it through. Just simple, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And this is how I'll turn these out. And then these typically last in my house, oh gosh, a day, maybe 2 max. They are delicious. We typically serve them with our beef stew, and then we will put them, sometimes we'll have them as dessert and put butter and cinnamon sugar. Oh yeah, you have it?
A snake.
You got a snake? You're making a nice big snake. Over here, right there, I'm rolling out, I have beef stew. I gotta finish it off by adding some cornstarch to make a slurry to thicken it up. But it has mushrooms, beef stew meat, carrots, celery, onions, and potatoes with beef broth, and then a little of kitchen bouquet. Kitchen bouquet is kind of like a browning sauce. It has a nice flavor, and then garlic salt and a bay leaf. Bay leaf is a leaf. It literally lives away. I probably can find it right here. This is bay leaf right here. This is a seasoning that you can use in soups and stews, and it gives a nice aromatic flavor to your soups. It's very savory and just tastes delicious. And it goes really well with, I think, beef stew. I always put it in my beef stew. If you ever eat at Chipotle, sometimes you can find bay leaf in their rice. I've seen videos of that. But it's kind of a universal thing, but it's just a dried out leaf that has a lot of good flavors in it. Okay, let's see. Let's roll this one out. And so this dough I made earlier. So you start out with warm water. So I had 1.5 cups of warm water, and I added a tablespoon of yeast and 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. And you let that sit for about 5-10 minutes until it foams. The sugar activates the yeast because yeast is a living organism, so you give it sugar to feed it to make it active, and that's what's gonna make the pretzels rise. And then once that the yeast has foamed, I added in a teaspoon of salt and 2.5 tablespoons of melted butter. And then I slowly added in 4 cups of flour. And I used the dough hook on my KitchenAid, which you can see over here. Got my KitchenAid out. And I used the dough hook to mix it up because otherwise it just takes a long time to do it with your hands and it's really messy. And you can literally do that and go on and do anything. And then oh, good job, buddy. Once it was mixed up, I put it in my oven on bread proof, which keeps the oven at 95 degrees, so it keeps it in a nice warm area. Before I got this oven, I actually used to do it on top of my dryer. So I would run my dryer, and then I would put a towel over the bowl while it was resting on top of the dryer, and the residual heat from the dryer, oh, thank you so much, would cause the breads to rise nicely. Because I find sometimes if your house isn't warm enough, your bread won't rise well because it needs the heat, helps the yeast activate and then rise the bread, helps it fill up with the air. So we're rolling out. I just have a few more left to roll out, and my water I can see is getting closer. So I have that. It's getting over there. Remember, that is just water with baking soda. So I do not use lye with mine because I think it's too caustic, and I prefer the taste of baking soda. I feel like it gives a more of an American soft pretzel versus a German one, which has a more crunchy outer shell to it. So I have 2 more. Do my little flick twist, and I'll have these out. And actually, as they sit, you can see they're puffing up a little more, so they're still rising. But when I bake them, you'll see in a little bit, they actually puff up a lot. So I've got this. You got one more after this one. And you roll it out nice and long. Now, if you wanted to do the traditional pretzel roll, I'm gonna do that right now. So let me see. You cross it, and then you have it go under. Oh yeah, there we go. You gotta do a twist. See how it takes a little bit longer? And it's like this. So this, and I'll put it on the tray, is if you were to do a more traditional pretzel, that's how it would look. You can do another one like that. It's not the most beautiful pretzel. Fun fact about pretzels. Pretzels, the idea, the concept of pretzels actually originated from the church in Germany, in the Renaissance time, or maybe Middle Ages, but it was a way for the priest or the pastor of the church. He wanted to give something good to little kids who were doing well. Oh yeah, I was gonna do a traditional one. Who are doing well, following the rules. So he took extra dough and he had them twisted as if they were praying. So that's why it looks like it's twisted. So it looks supposed to be like hands praying together. And that's where the concept of the pretzel twist came from. Again, not the most beautiful, as you can see why I prefer to do the twisted knot, because it just sticks together. It's not quite as hard. So my water over here is starting to boil, which is perfect. So by the time it took me to roll out these, it will be ready for me to dip it in the water and boil it. So you pretty much, you put it in, each one, and I do a couple at a time, but you boil them for about 30 seconds, and you gotta flip them over. So I'll drop them in again. If you're not used to comfortable around heat, be careful, but I'm pretty tolerant with heat, it doesn't bother me. And I kind of just do a count, and you'll have them in there and they're cooking slowly, and you can see them kind of bubbling up. They're kind of puffing up a little more, the heat's activating it. I'll boil them a little bit on this side, and then all I do is after they've been in there, I just pop them over, pop it over, pop it over, boil it a little bit on this way for a little bit, and then I'll pop them out and I'll put the next set in. I have a slotted spoon here for when taking them out. It works better than tongs because tongs you end up squishing them. If you use a slotted spoon, when you pull it out, the water will drain down below it. So I just have that, and get this one out. And you see now how much bigger they've puffed up with them being in here. So they're a lot bigger than the ones I had dropped in. And I'm gonna pop these 4 in, and it's the kind of repeat. So it's actually a lot easier. Oh, you got a fighting spoon, very cool. It's a lot easier to do than people think. The recipe is very simple to make. Let's see how many, it's not very many. It's probably less than 10 ingredients. You have flour, butter, yeast, sugar, salt is like the main pretzel thing, and then you have baking soda, which you put the boil in, and then you'll do a little egg wash on them before you bake them, and then all you do is rub them with butter and put a little pretzel salt on it. So it's less than 10 ingredients. Really simple to make. It's one that takes more of a wait time, so it does need to rise or for about an hour and a half after you make the dough. That way, if you try to roll them out, bake them, then you'll have super dense dough that won't work well. Get these out. And you can also, I make them smaller than they think. You can do them bigger. You can do them in different shapes. I have tried like pretzel sticks. It was a lot harder to get them out of the boiling water when I did the pretzel sticks, so I've just stuck with my little tight knots. So they're more like pretzel knots, but it works well. And we'll let them boil here. And kind of keep them, you try to just do equal boiling time on each side. So I'm going to flip these over. And I'll be there as the steaming come up. It's kind of nice. It's very cold here. I'm just outside of Nashville. It's in the 30s. Actually, I think, what is it? It's 25 degrees outside. So beef stew and warm hot pretzels are perfect for a chilly night like tonight. And then I will put our last, oops, missed that one. I think our last set in. 1, 2, 3. I'll have those cooking. While those are boiling right there, I'm going to get an egg out of my fridge. And I'm going to get a small bowl and a fork. And I'm going to pop these, flip them. There we go. Oh yeah, careful buddy, I don't want to accidentally splash you, bud. And we'll get the next one out. Also, one thing that's really great about this is when you dump the baking soda water out, it actually helps clean up your sink, because baking soda is a natural cleaning agent. So I have a white sink, so the hot water actually helps clean it up. But I'm just going to pour it out over into my sink. And now I'm going to crack my egg. And then I'm going to take my half shell that I have, fill it up with water, and pour it in. So this will be my egg wash. And this is what's gonna give the pretzel a little shiny coat on it. They do this on breads and pastries. You can do, some people do milk, some people use just the egg white instead of the whole egg. But what you do is, I just gotta get my brush, and let's see which drawer it is. Here it is. So this is like a basting brush. I have like a silicone. They make them, sometimes they're made out of like coarse fibers, but you'll just dip it in the egg yolk mixture, the egg wash, and you're just gonna take a little bit and you're gonna just spread it over the top of each one, just like this. And these actually cook in the oven really, really fast. I'm gonna put them in the oven in just a second. I have the oven preheated to 450 degrees. So you cook them at a high temperature, but for not very long. They'll cook for about 7 minutes. And while I have these cooking, I'm gonna show you guys how to thicken up my beef stew so that it's got that nice thickness that a stew has instead of being soupy. So I've got all of them covered with a nice egg wash. You see, you don't even use most of it. And then I'm gonna take it and put it in the oven over here. So I'll be in here. I have my oven over here. It's set. It's preheated to 450 degrees right now. So I'm gonna open it up. I'm gonna place it on there. There. And then I'm just going to, I'll put my light on so we can see it. I'm gonna set my timer for 7 minutes. 7 minutes to win it. So those are gonna bake for 7 minutes. And right now, while it's baking, I'm going to make a little slurry with my cornstarch. So a slurry is when you mix, it can be juice or soup broth, or one that with cornstarch to thicken it. So I'm gonna take just my broth out, because if you dump the cornstarch into the soup right now, it will congeal into thick little balls, which will not be good, because nobody wants chunky soup or stew. So I'm gonna get some of my broth out right here. Doesn't matter if you have any fruit or vegetable chunks in it, that's fine. And then right here, and then I'm gonna take my cornstarch and I'm going to take a couple heaping spoonfuls in, like this. And then I'm gonna stir this carefully, because I kind of grabbed a small bowl, into a slurry. So it's when you've dissolved the cornstarch into the hot broth. Because if you put it straight in your soup, it will congeal really fast, because heat activates the starch in the corn syrup, which causes it to thicken. So if your pot is really, really hot, it will cause it to, the balls, before they can dissolve, to thicken into little chunks. Like, kind of think about tapioca pudding. So now that I have this slurry, I'm going to pour it into my soup over here. I pour my soup up into high so I can get it to start bubbling, so that when I pour it in here, it will start to thicken. So I want to, before I pour it in, I want to show you how soupy it is right now. Do you see how quickly it runs? So this is like, this is a soup. Now I want it to be a stew, so I want it to be thicker. So I'm using my cornstarch slurry, and I'm just going to pour it in here. Slowly add that, because each time I pour it in, it will thicken it up. And thick. And then you just stir. You can see it's already starting to get a little bit thicker. The viscosity, which is how runny a liquid is starting to go slower and slower. And you can see how it's already starting to thicken up. And this kind of gives it a nice gravy-like consistency, which is, if you're gluten-free, this actually works. Cornstarch has no gluten in it, so it's essentially giving you a nice gravy consistency without using flour or wheat. A lot of times people will use this to thicken up their pies. They'll put cornstarch in it, especially with like a blueberry or strawberry pie that already is pretty juicy. So you can see how much thicker this stew is, and all you can see, it's more like gravy now. It's much thicker. And this will keep it together, keeps all the nice flavor of the broth on the things. And then now that I've gotten it stirred up, I'm going to turn off my heat. So I'm turning my stove off. I had it on high just while I was adding that. And now I'm gonna start getting ready to take my, listen for my beep, to take my pretzels out, because they're gonna be done in just a few minutes. So I'm gonna clear off this area. so that I'll be ready. I've got my pretzel salt. If you make homemade pretzels, you really need a pretzel salt. It doesn't have to be this brand. I've used a Boise, Idaho pretzel salt, which is more of like a flake. These are more granules, but regular table salt is much saltier. So if you put that on like straight up or use a kosher salt, it would be very, very salty. This one is like, pretzel salt has been, I want to say like a rehydrated salt. So it's much, it doesn't have as much salt kick to it. So you can put it on there and have it chunks and you don't have to worry about dying of a salt overdose in there. So I've got my soup things. I'm cooking this in a Dutch oven. And that, you see, I've turned off the heat, but it's still bubbling. Dutch ovens, actually, they're made out of cast iron, so they retain your heat, which is why they're really good for either baking in the oven or doing stews, because it can allow it to simmer slowly and nicely, get the nice bubble to it. It looks like I have about 2 more minutes left on my clock for the pretzels. They're raising nicely. If you want to come, I can kind of show you. I can peek open with the oven, just a quick peek, so you can see how they're puffing up. But every time you open the oven, your temperature goes down. So I'm going to do a quick one, and you can see how they're rising up. They look really nice. They're getting a little gold. They've puffed up. They have a nice sheen to it. I'm going to close it up and put it in there. It's kind of like a saying that a watch pot never boils. If you are constantly opening your oven and checking on it, you reduce it. The saying is every time you open it, you reduce your oven down 10 degrees. And for the pretzels, like, it's not a big deal, but if you're cooking something precise like a meringue or a pastry or something that needs to be cooked at an exact temperature, you'll ruin it. You'll cause your cake or your meringue or something like that to deflate if you open it up, because it won't have the right temperature. So I showed you a quick peek, but I'm gonna keep it closed until the end, and then I'll show you at the very end what we add there. Oh, while we get that, I got my oven mitts, because remember, if you take a pan out of the oven, it is hot, and it will be hot once you put it on there. I've got my butter, some butter that I have left. I used this, half of this, or a couple of bit of this stick earlier in the recipe, and it's nice and soft, so when they come out, I can rub the butter over it, and it will melt nicely, and then sprinkle with the salt. The stew is looking excellent. It's got a nice thickening to it, which will make it a really, really delicious. I love to dip. Oh, careful, buddy. Remember, this is hot. I love to dip my pretzels in the stew, like it just gives it a nice flavor. I think I'm gonna get my oven mitts on, and I think we're gonna be just about ready to take these pretzels out. So you can come join me over here. Oh, they have a nice golden color to them. They're getting there. And my thing, yeah, do you see them, Teddy? Ooh, I see them in the oven. They're of a nice color. They're baking really nicely. Oh, and there's my beeper. So I'm gonna turn it off. This oven has a really annoying beeper to it, so if you actually don't turn it off, it just keeps beeping and beeping and beeping and beeping. Pop them out. They have a nice thing. I might want them, I'm gonna bake them for maybe 30 more seconds, because I like them to have a more, this is, if you like them more doughy or whatnot, this will be this is perfect for you, but I like them to have like a golden brown kind of hue to them, because then it just makes sure that you don't have a super doughy inside. But they're perfect for eating straight out. They're also great a day later. If you reheat it, sometimes I cut them in half and I put them in a toaster and put a little butter on them. But now they are ready. So I've got them coming out. This is a very hot tray, so I've got my bear claws in there, and I'm gonna put them right here. And I will, very hot, so make sure you don't touch it. Yep, there, you gotta be safe. Remember, Mom takes the pan out, you gotta be very safe. So I got my softened butter, and then I'm just gonna go gently. You see how you just put it over, and it instantly melts. If you take butter right out of the fridge, it doesn't melt as nicely, so you kind of have to hold it a little bit longer. But as long as it's been softened, it will melt nicely and be ready. And then once I have the butter on here, I'm gonna put the salt on it. Sometimes I leave some of them unbuttered and unsalted, and we reheat them and have cinnamon sugar on them, so like a dessert pretzel. But tonight I think we're gonna salt them all. There we go. Now you see, now they've got a nice, and you barely use any butter, but it just adds a nice things, and it helps the pretzel salt stick. So now I've got my pretzel salt out, and I'm just going to carefully shake it on just like this. And remember, this is, pretzel salt is different from typical salt, or table salt or kosher salt. It's kind of been rehydrated, so it is less salty, but it has bigger chunks. So even though it might look, oh, that's a ton of salt, it's actually not as salty as you think. But we're just about finished here with our delicious pretzels and beef stew. So I'll plate up one for you guys to see how we do it. I've got my little, I always call these my little cauldron. So we'll plate up. It's nice, you can see the beef chunks in it. There's celery, mushrooms, and you see how the thickness from the cornstarch made it delicious, and thick and gravy-like. It's a good traditional American beef stew. So I got the beef stew and one pretzel right here, and we can break this pretzel apart. You guys can see we break it. I look at that, so good. And then I love to just dip it in. Delicious. Is it so good? Thank you. But if you guys want to see me cook some more, come back. I will try to show you every day. Earlier today I made banana donuts, now pretzels. I'll probably post the recipe sometime so you guys can check it out. But thanks for being here with me. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye guys.
Bye.